Well, welcome everyone to this orientation session about the Christine Brunswick Fellowship for students and for law professors. And we have both of them on the call, both students and law professors right now, but the recording is for those who couldn't make the call because they had class or other commitments. But the first thing we'd like to do is just tell you a little bit about, the fellowship. The fellowship has been around for a while. It was actually created in 2008, so it's been around for about 15 years now. And about a decade ago, it was named for Christine Brunswick, who was a former executive director of the tax section. And she was very, very focused on public interest work. And so it was named in her honor. And so the basics about the fellowship is that it's a 2-year fellowship. So it would be, the application cycle is starting now. These fellowships would start in the fall of 2024. So we're looking now at recruiting, in essence, the class of 2024 to 2026 for the fellowship. And this fellowship is focused on people who are either, currently law students who will be graduating before next September, or recent graduates, people who've been out for a few years, people who are in LLM programs, things like that. Not people with a great deal of experience, but actually a different fellowship that is focused on people that have more experience. And so the, fellowship, basically revolves around the candidate finding a host organization that you'd be able to work with in the area of, tax public interest work. And then you would naturally be doing, kind of whatever work that organization needs. But in addition to that, we always look for the fellow to be doing a project over the course of the 2 years. And I'll let Susan talk a little bit about examples of some of the projects that fellows have done in the past.
So thank you, Tony. In preparation for this call, I went back and I looked at the page on the ABA website that discusses it's almost 2 decades of fellows, and I have to say, it was pretty mind-blowing to look at this. And I would urge you all to look at this page to get a sense of what people have done. The projects are sort of geographic in the sense that, for instance, we're now funding somebody who has a justice bus that goes around to very rural parts of the state. We've had other people in rural states, for instance, Maine, who have worked particularly with rural taxpayers who can't ordinarily access representation or the IRS for that matter, but just, to help them understand what they need to do to secure representation that an LITC can offer. So there have been that there in terms of, there was another fellow who worked in a Great Plains state, another very rural area, trying to, let folks know not just about the earning of credit and the other refundable credits, but also that if the IRS says no, you still have rights and how to handle, those responsibilities and so forth. So I sort of put those in the bucket of thinking about geography and taxpayers' needs. Then there's another group of people that I think of as thinking about populations and what that might be. And so we've had several fellows who have worked with domestic abuse survivors within the context of either an LITC or some type of national organization that works specifically with domestic abuse survivors. Military personnel, we had a fellow who worked in San Diego where there's a huge Navy presence, and so her project was focused specifically on working with members of the Navy, but it could be, the section also does work in connection with military bases across the country. So that becomes sort of another way to think about, well, maybe my project is, working with military families. There have been several projects that have worked on employee classification issues or misclassification issues. So people who are independent contractors, but really need to understand what it means to be an independent contractor. And is that an appropriate classification? Maybe it should be employee instead, and sort of figuring out how to not just work with taxpayers on that, but also think about sort of like more systemic change issues with regard to these issues. We've had a bunch of projects that have worked with migrant workers and also with immigrants from various countries. Some have targeted specific populations, for instance, Eastern Europe. Others have looked at immigrants from other communities around the world. And then with regard to migrants, it's sort of the migrant population. So there have been some fellows that have worked in that. There have been some fellows that have worked with sort of the connection between low-income taxpayer clinics and the free taxpayer preparation VITA sites, and sort of building the bridge between getting a return done and handling the consequences if the IRS audits that return, and really trying to provide sort of wraparound services for those clients. There have been some really interesting projects sort of dealing with non-federal tax issues, and this would be state and local tax advocacy, but also property tax advocacy. We funded a fellow in Philadelphia who worked specifically with senior citizens facing property tax foreclosures. And so she was able to work on individual cases, but also achieve systemic reform within the local government as to relief for those taxpayers. And we've funded projects that work specifically with the elderly. So again, a specific population. And finally, a couple of projects that have worked with micro enterprises, and now we're funding one, but we have in the past as well. So you can see that really it's up to you to figure out, well, what do you find particularly, the field of tax is vast. It's not just sort of somebody coming in saying, I want my earning of tax credit, but it's all these issues. And it's like for you to say, boy, this is really intriguing me, or this is an issue I think we can really push the boundaries on, or this is something I want others to know about as well. And so for you to figure out, well, this is how I'm going to sort of describe this project. This is how, if I were to get funded for this project, this is how I would do it. And here's an organization that I think is suited to host this kind of project. And that's how I would describe sort of envisioning your project. I think, Tony, I kind of answered several questions there. So
yeah, no,
thank you for the space to do that.
No, that's great. I mean, and that's a good segue into talking a little bit about the application process.
Yes.
There's an application. Hopefully Meg or Michelle can pop into the chat the link to the page where you can see the application. I think that's also the same page where all of the past fellows are listed.
Yes.
So you'll be able to see everything on one spot.
The other thing that's really cool about this fellowship, if I can get back up on my soapbox for a minute here, is the opportunity to work with the ABA tax section itself. So it's not just you become the attorney at ABC tax practice, but you also get to work with, you're funded to come to all the meetings, whether, the fall one is virtual, the other two, the winter and the May one, are in person. And not only do you get to sort of sit in the audience and learn that way, but you also get to be on panels. And so in the Pro Bono Tax Clinics Committee, for instance, we've made it a point to use fellows to moderate panels. And so you get to know your panelists, you get to know the subject area, and these panels typically are very well attended by other low-income taxpayer clinics, by members, named partners in law firms, and by judges. So it's like right out of the box, you get your name in front of them. It's kind of scary at first, I'll say, but it's a way for your work to get showcased, but also for you to help others present topics that are timely and of interest. So that's another facet of this fellowship. Getting involved in writing comments. If you become active with the Pro Bono Tax Clinics Committee, for instance, we do a lot of writing in response to proposed regulations. Our comments are anywhere from 30 to 60 pages. It's almost like writing a law review article, except we tend to see change as a result. Whereas, sorry, Tony, so it's really beneficial. And it's also an opportunity to engage with the IRS. I mean, sometimes the IRS wants to talk with the comment authors, and that becomes a really cool process as well. So these are sort of the range of opportunities that you get if you become a fellow.
Yeah, I mean, it's opening the door to a lot of different things. And so in terms of the application, you'll see there's an application you need to fill out with basic information. There's a few essays that you have to write. Naturally, there's, a requirement for recommendation, like a reference letter kind of thing. Also a letter of support from the host organization. As I said before, you need to identify the host organization upfront before you submit the application. So there's still time. It's September 22nd now. The applications aren't actually due until the 9th of November. So there's still a good bit of time before the application is due for you to find a host organization, and one that you're comfortable would be a good fit for you and for the project that you're thinking of doing. Because just to let you know, in addition to kind of all the networking opportunities that you get with the section, you also get mentoring from folks within the section. But then, one thing that's always top of mind for the committee when we're choosing, who should be the fellows, and we choose typically two fellows each cycle. So, for the two fellows that we choose this year, what's top of mind is we're thinking about, is this person going to get the support that they need to be successful and to have a good fellowship at that host organization? So, kind of does it seem like the host organization is really dedicated to supporting this person, developing them? Because we know this fellowship is focused on people who are recent grads, people who are going to probably need a little bit more guidance as they, get their feet wet and become tax lawyers. And so, we're looking for them to get that kind of support, not just from the section, because we can control that. We want to make sure that, you're also getting it from the host organization as well. So that's something to just consider as you're thinking about who you want as a host organization, because hopefully you're looking for that as well. And so then you can be more proactive in thinking about it when you're, considering organizations that you might want to partner with.
One of the interesting things I noticed, Tony, when I was going through the list of previous fellows is how many were the first tax attorney in their organization. Mm-hmm. So the question of organizational support is not specific as to, do you get tax analysts daily, for instance, but also whether, sort of there's institutional support for you, whether you're the only tax attorney or joining a team of tax attorneys.
Well, there should be at least one other tax attorney supervising you at your organization.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I stand corrected.
Yeah, but so the applications, like I said, are due in early November 9th. And then typically what happens after that, like a few weeks after that, the committee meets, selects finalists, and then, late November, more typically like December, there's interviews with the candidates, the finalists for the fellowship. And then we also interview the host organizations as well, just to make sure that we're getting, the chance to talk with them and make sure that they really do, they really are dedicated to hosting the fellow and to supporting the fellow and, answering any questions that we need to kind of have answered about the kinds of support that you'll get, what kinds of, who will be supervising you, things like that, to make sure that you're going to have a successful fellowship, because you're going to be there for 2 years. So we want to make sure this is going to work out for that lengthy period of time. And that's a long period of time to be together. Trying to think, and so after I just forgot to mention it, after we interview the candidates and we interview the host organizations, of course we make a decision that typically happens and is communicated to the fellows December or early mid-January. So you should have an answer back either before the end of the year or at the very beginning of 2024. With that, I think that was all that Susan and I were supposed to cover at the beginning, unless we missed anything. And if we didn't miss anything, I will turn it over to Meg.
Yes, I think Susan and Tony covered a lot there. I think most of it. Just to clarify one thing, we found that since all of our fellows are either just coming out of law school or have been practicing for very few years. One of our incoming fellows just did a year as a clerk, not in the tax firm, but for a different type of judge. That one of the factors for success is having a tax lawyer on site who is supervising them. Usually it'll be the person who's running the low income tax clinic, but it doesn't have to be. And while Susan's correct, that's not exactly required, I would say that this is something that the committee, especially in recent years, has been very focused on, because it's hard for us from the tax section to do hands-on supervision and sort of like the amount of support that is needed for a new lawyer, from a central place, even from a mentorship place. And then once the fellows are selected, they're considered essentially employees of the host organization. So the tax section funds the fellowship. We provide mentorship. I'm a point of contact. Susan is a point of contact. Tony as well throughout the fellowship to bounce concerns or questions off of, ideas about a project. But ultimately, when it comes down to HR concerns or anything along those, anything like that, that all runs through the host organization. The funding that we provide goes directly to the HR department of the host organization. And we would walk the host organization through all of this. So you don't, as the applicant, you don't have to answer all these questions for them. You can certainly direct them towards myself or towards Ty Hansen in my office, who does the finances and logistics. But just so that you know, the stipend is listed in the application about what we think it will be for next year. We don't know the exact amount until the federal judicial clerk salary scale is set, which it hasn't been for 2024 fall yet. But it doesn't change that much year to year. So you can see the approximate amount of the stipend in the application form in the link that I provided in the chat. The fellowship also reimburses the host organization for all of your benefits. So you would get all the benefits of an attorney at the host organization, and then we would pay them for those benefits, whatever those benefits are. It also includes interest on student loan payments. So that's going to obviously vary person by person. Some people don't have any. Some very lucky people don't have any law school debt. And some people have very substantial loans. So you fill out a form and you let us know what that interest is going to be. If anyone has specific questions about any of that, with your set of facts or your personal situation, I'm happy to answer any of those questions. And if I can, I'll pass you to Ty, who certainly can. And if your host organization that you're working with has any questions, send them to us as well. We also did a session just like this for host organizations on Tuesday. That's already on our website. And when I'm not talking, I don't multitask that well, I will put it in the chat so you can share it if your host organization wasn't able to make that session, but they want to hear the information that we provided, which is similar to what we're saying here, but slightly more tailored. You can share that with them as well. It's just for public consumption. Let's see what else on, I think, I know we referenced the ABA's meetings, but I can't recall if we said specifically that the fellowship also covers travel, lodging, and registration for all of those meetings. And so let's see, I think that's about all. Did you guys talk about, now I can't recall, did you guys talk about the matching process?
In terms of the host organization?
Or that we can,
yeah, we can help with that. So
yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. Okay. So if there are folks out there that know where they want to be or don't know where they want to be, but don't have a host organization in mind, whether that's those who are attending today or those who are listening to this recording, you can feel free to contact me. I believe my information is on the application. And feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to try to connect you either with the LATCs in your target city, or we know of some host organizations that are looking for fellows but don't have one in mind. And if you're open to any geography, we can help make those matches. You could talk to them to see if you think you might be a good fit. But there are plenty of LATCs who would probably be thrilled to have a talented person coming out of law school with lots of energy and interested in learning more about tax. So it's certainly something that we're happy to help with. And between me and Susan and Tony, we know a lot of people, or at least we have access to them. So feel free to reach out if you have questions about that. Is there anything else that we need to cover? Omid, did you want to talk? Sorry to put you on the spot, but since you're here, do you want to talk for like a minute or two just about your experience as a fellow and how it's helped you in your career? Like
Yeah.
2 minutes, Omid, 2 minutes. Omid is a excellent speaker, and he just gave an hour-long presentation about the IRS's strategic operating plan. So he's done a lot of talking for us today. So we'll take just a couple minutes.
All right, sounds good. And then I have to actually hop off after my couple minutes. But I was an ABA tax fellow from 2018 to 2020. My project was on worker misclassification. I started at Philadelphia Legal Assistance, and then I stayed on as a staff attorney there till 2023. And it was an amazing experience. I got to go to all these great conferences, learn a lot. I still go to the conferences. I'm a vice chair of pro bono and tax clinics. And now I'm a professor at Temple Law. So it worked out really well. And I helped a lot of people. I'm an expert in misclassification now. And I'm grateful to those who helped make it happen.
Yes, Omid has quite the national reputation as being a rapidly rising tax lawyer in this space. And I like to think that the fellowship helped launch that career, although he's so talented, I'm sure he would have found his way anyway. Maybe we just got you there a little faster.
Well, I really appreciate it. And I'm going to hop off now because I have to go to another.
You've had a busy day with us already today, Omid.
Oh, good. Bye, everyone.
Does anyone have any questions?
So yes, I have a question. I wanted to find out for when we're submitting our application, do we also submit the idea that we have for our projects during the fellowship?
Yeah, so the application itself includes, that's a good question. The application itself includes essays at the end. So the applicant should outline one of the questions is specifically about the project. So the applicant should be as specific as possible. Obviously, the committee does not expect everyone to come with like a fully formed project. That's sort of what you work out as you're going along. But the more specific things like, I will conduct outreach and get more clients for the clinic are not particularly engaging. Things like, I'm going to work with this specific population. Here are the tax issues that they face and why I think this is an important population to work with. Here's, and like in the city that I plan to work in, there are a lot of people that fall into this population. They're being underserved. Here's what my project would do to help, correct that kind of thing. That was just an example. It could be any number of things, of course. Something more targeted that will help the committee understand why is this project important and what exactly would it look like? What would be sort of like the ideal result of the project? There are other essay questions too, sort of about your own career path and things like that. But I sort of walk through what you plan to do for the project as part of the application, and the selection committee, which is made up of members of the tax section, does take into account, is this a creative project? Is this a project going to have impact? But that's just one of the factors that they look at. You don't have to feel too stressed about it. I mean, coming up with a good project is certainly important, but also having a good host organization that's going to give you good support is important. Having undemonstrated interest in tax is important. All those kinds of things.
Yeah. And the only thing I would add to that is, thinking about the host organization as well, that, something the committee looks for and that it would be great to talk about in, describing it is, why is this project important for the people that are served by this host organization? Like, what does it bring to the table for them?
Right.
Since why is the host organization enthusiastic about your project as you are? What is it, adding to what they can provide to their clients or to new clients that, you would be bringing in? So
and if you run out of words to cover that, the host organization also provides a letter in support of your project, so they can also throw some of that into their letter as well, so it still gets to the application. One other thing that we've mentioned to people who've reached out about, how do I submit the best application possible? If you have any kind of like anything else you want to tell the committee, any sort of other like extenuating circumstances, maybe there's like a less than stellar spot in your transcript you wanted to talk about, or maybe you want to talk about why you're committed to this location even though you've never lived there before. I don't know, any other sort of like random information that you want to provide, you can sort of put an asterisk on the application and add it into the essays, or you can mention it in the essays, or you can sort of try to figure out a way to work it into your application, because the first stage of the review process is just paper. So while you could explain some of these things in an interview, you want to get to the interview stage to be able to explain the things. And the best way to get past the first round of analysis by the selection committee would be to explain anything you think they might see and be like, what's going on there? We've had a couple people in the last few years that I think would have benefited from doing that. So now I'm suggesting it to people.
I think that's excellent advice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there, Shayna, did you have a question?
Yes, I saw in the application that it was for nonprofit hosts or government organizations. I was wondering, are there additional parameters to the host, or is it that broad?
It's that broad. I would say 90-something% of the host organizations end up being low-income tax clinics, but by no stretch of the imagination is that required. One of our current fellows is with a nonprofit tax policy sort of organization. Another one is working with a group that works with entities on tax issues, charitable entities and sort of businesses. I'm trying to think of what other types of organizations. We haven't actually had, I don't think we've had anyone at a government agency, although it is technically allowed. It's tricky. It's like
we haven't had a government. We've had a range of nonprofits. So some have been, as you said, Meg, low-income taxpayer clinics, but some haven't been low-income taxpayer clinics, but yet want to, sort of grow some kind of income tax advocacy, or some kind of tax advocacy project.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Well, after you disconnect from this call, if you realize, oh my goodness, I have more questions, please feel free to reach out. Meg's information is all over the application information, all over the website for the ABA. I think she's the point of contact, but she also, and there's her contact information now in the chat. So, Meg responds speedily and knows how to involve others if there are issues that she'd like to involve others in deliberating. So think about projects, think about sponsoring organizations. If you have, thoughts that you want to run by, Meg is a non-voting member of the committee. So, if you want to think out loud, that's fine too. In the end, we're looking to fund, really creative projects for creative law graduates. So,
yeah. Well, sorry.
To say the only thing I would add, because I didn't have everyone introduce themselves from our end at the beginning.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, just to make sure that just because Meg is a great person to contact because she's the counsel for the tax section, so she works for the tax section, and she's the person who's always been there and doing this stuff. So she has the probably biggest bank of knowledge about all of this among the four of us. But then I'm Tony Infante, and I teach at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, and I'm the vice chair for pro bono and outreach for the section. And especially for law professors watching, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email into the chat, but I'm easily found on the University of Pittsburgh Law School website. And then Susan, if you wanted to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Susan Morgenstern. I'm presently with the Center for Taxpayer Rights. I've also been at the Taxpayer Advocate Service and the Legal Aid Society of Cleveland. So if you have questions about working with nonprofit organizations, something along those lines, I'd be glad to help you, or low-income taxpayer clinics, I'd be glad to help you with that. And I'll put my contact in the chat as well.
Hi, and then I'm Michelle. I'm with the ABA tax section. I just provide a lot of the admin support, and nice to meet you all.
If there are the last call for questions. Well, if there are no further questions, thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing your applications.
Yeah, I was going to say, we look forward to it, 'cause I'm not a member of the committee this year, but it's always been really exciting to me to read the applications and think, like, oh my God, there's so much to do in this world. Look at all these people who are so eager to do it. It's, I find it to be really inspirational. So thank you for the effort that you'll be making when you apply.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I always love this process as well, just like Susan said. And I've been on the committee. I was on the committee even before I was vice chair for pro bono and outreach, and I've always really enjoyed it. It's really rewarding.
So, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.